War in Ukraine is the focus of a harrowing first-person account available now in The New Yorker. Journalist Luke Mogelson details his time embedded with a unit of international volunteers who would execute recon missions along the front lines in Ukraine while trying to avoid surveillance and attack. And the contributing writer for The New Yorker joins us now. Luke, your latest piece titled "Trapped in the Trenches" on Ukraine's battlefields, drone surveillance makes it almost impossible to maneuver. So, Luke, give us a little sense of what the day-to-day life is like, what you saw embedded with this group.
Well, it's incredibly difficult and brutal and dangerous. And the Ukrainians who are holding the line on the Eastern Front where I was have had to endure great hardship for months at a time, sometimes without respite. I was with an international reconnaissance team that consisted of 2 Americans, 2 New Zealanders, and a German, and they were pushing forward from the frontline trenches into the no man's land, oftentimes at night, using tree lines for cover to probe the gray zone and identify the forwardmost Russian positions for Ukrainians to target with artillery. So that was obviously even more dangerous and risky, and many of their comrades had been injured and killed, and the same goes obviously for their Ukrainian counterparts.
Yeah, and speaking of danger, Luke, in your piece, you recount a close encounter while pinned down in a Ukrainian village. Using the code names of the soldiers you were with, you write that, quote, Doc asked Herring to locate the Russian tank. "It's coming, about 10 degrees to the left," he said. "I gotta wait for this to subside to run out and grab the drone," Herring told him. Another strike near the house made Doc's response inaudible. "I gotta get that drone," Herring said. It was pitch black in the cellar. Even when 3 of us sat with our knees drawn up, the 4th person could fit only by standing next to the ladder. "Down," Herring barked, though there was nowhere further down to go. I bowed my head and pressed my palms into the dirt floor, which quaked as 3 successive impacts left a ringing in my ears. "We'll be all right, boys," Herring said. He sparked his lighter and held the flame under his face to show us that he was smiling. At first, I was annoyed by what seemed like a juvenile display of bravado. Then I realized that Herring was trying to put the photographer and me at ease. "I feel safe," he said, as half a dozen more shells detonated outside. At least Jordan, just impossible almost to imagine how dangerous and harrowing this was.
I'm so glad that you're safe. This was an incredible, dangerous embed for you to go on. And you went with this group of international volunteers because the Ukrainian military isn't obviously arranging embeds the way that the Pentagon press would do for the press corps. And can you talk a bit about those international volunteers? How many did you meet? This was a small team of 5, but do you have a sense of how many international volunteers are in Ukraine fighting for the Ukrainian cause? And how long have they been there? What kind of duration are they staying and fighting in these really tough, dangerous conditions?
Well, at the very beginning of the invasion, Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, put out a call for international volunteers to help the war effort. And according to the foreign minister, about 20,000 individuals from 52 different countries responded. Now, since then, that number has dramatically fallen. I think a lot of the foreigners who initially went to Ukraine and volunteered to fight weren't really prepared for what the reality of the combat would be like there. It's much different, even from Afghanistan and Iraq. It's artillery and tank and trench warfare, which most Western soldiers, even with significant combat experience, have never really been through. So there was a high rate of attrition over the first several months of the war. And those who remain, including the team I was with, have really been through the ringer and are incredibly brave and courageous and committed. We don't know exactly how many of them are still in the country because neither the Ukrainian government nor the International Legion releases those numbers. But there are teams on all of the fronts, and a lot of them are doing this very forward reconnaissance work.
Mike Barnicle.
Luke, what we're looking at, these clips, this is not a movie that you were part of. Could you talk to the psychological effects of a culture, a society, in this case Ukraine, it's not Afghanistan or Iraq, in this case it's Ukraine. What happens when people, even soldiers, are under a continuous impact, a concussive impact of artillery, the psychological impact of it, the fear that you can sometimes taste? What did you witness and what do you feel now about that?
Well, unlike other kinds of warfare, counterinsurgency, urban combat, a lot of artillery and trench warfare comes down to chance and things that you, as an individual soldier, have no control over. So it doesn't matter how elite you are, how experienced you are, how much knowledge you have. You have a very limited ability to leverage your skills as a fighter to improve your chances of survival, because at the end of the day, the shell is either going to land on you or it's not. So I think that has a very particular and specific psychological impact on the soldiers who are tasked with holding the front lines, especially in eastern Ukraine. That is unlike anything, again, that Western soldiers experience in Iraq or Afghanistan. And many of the Ukrainians don't have a choice. And so they have had to embrace a kind of fatalism, I think, according to which they remain exposed to extreme, constant, and prolonged danger and risk. And not only that, but continue to function and be efficient as soldiers. So whereas myself and the photographer I was with, David Gutenfelder, all we really had to do was just weather it. And that was tough enough, frankly. But the soldiers we were with and reporting on, they also have to work and conduct missions and remain cool-headed under that same pressure, which can be really paralyzing, even for short periods of time. And again, these guys are dealing with it for months at a stretch.
Extraordinarily difficult stories, both harrowing and heroic. This piece is online now for The New Yorker. Luke Mogelson, thank you so much for your reporting.